Welcome to PM Documentary. Today, we're going to talk about a very important topic, Mexico in the 1800s. This time was very important for the Mexican history, since it would make a huge impact in society that are still reflected nowadays. The topics that we will cover today are the ones that impacted the most during that period, as they mark that century and the Mexico we have today. Napoleon's invasion of Spain led to the initiation of the Mexican revolutions. It all started in September 1816 with the Grito of Dolores with José Morelos. He gained power and attention and later became the leader of Mexico's independence movement. Morelos and his people, which consisted of millions of angry natives and mestizos, raising arms against the Spanish government. A decade after a decade of effort, Morelos established an independent nation. This date marked Mexico history. Morelos was later captured and killed at Chihuahua in 1811. José Morelos, Pavón Mariano Matamoros, and Vicente Guerrero carried on with Morelos' rebellions against the Spanish royalty. The war lasted 11 years from 1810 to 1821 until the Treaty of Córdoba, where Mexico was established as an independent monarchy. 18 months later, Santa Anna and Guadalupe Victoria established Mexico as the first Mexican republic. This led Mexico into the First Empire. The First Empire started in July 21, 1821 till March 19, 1823. As provided by the Plan de Iguala, Agustín Iturbide also was the leader of this empire. He was a Creole and took absolute power over Mexico in July 1822. He made a lot of impacts in the Mexican history. Iturbide was emperor of a huge empire, from California in the north to Panama. After the independence, Mexico ended up without a government and spent lots of money on the war, so they were bankrupt. This created a lot of debts to Mexico and made its economy decrease. So Iturbide thought replacing the Peninsulares, who ended up with the most of the capital during the colonial days, would rectify the ills of the economy. People started to see no improvement and wanted Iturbide out of power, so they started to act upon. Soon, in 1823, Santa Anna declared Plan de Casamata, and he overthrew Iturbide out of power, making the First Empire come to an end. Santa Anna ruled Mexico from 1833 until 1855. Mexico became a centralist region, which consists of the president having all the power as well as his subordinates. Santa Anna's way of ruling never helped Mexico during his controlling time. Mexico went to war 3 times and lost half of its territory through sale for a minimum pay or military defeat. This kept Mexico in a constant risk of bankruptcy and military intervention. As a result, a continuing dispute over Texas and the U.S. trying to get California and New Mexico, the U.S. declares the first war to Mexico. America was fast planning its strategies and invaded both coasts of Mexico. Even though the U.S. dominated and had several victories, Mexico refused to admit they've lost. So in 1847, the U.S. decided to send army to capture Mexico's cities, and a peaceful treaty was reached. Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. It states that Rio Grande was now the south boundary between Texas and California. Later, Santa Anna sold New Mexico to the U.S. for only $15 million, which is half the Mexican territory. Mexicans were mad at its leader, so when Mexico City was captured, Santa Anna retired to exile. After Mexico won its independence from Spain, the first liberal period finally came to Mexico. It all started with the war in Texas from 1835 to 1836. This movement was created by Texans that wanted to be an independent colony. Later, they wanted to be part of U.S., leading Mexico and the United States into a war from 1846 to 1848. When Santa Anna signed the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, making Mexico lose a lot of territory, such as California, Arizona, New Mexico, and the Rio Grande boundary from Texas, as well as portions of Utah, Nevada, and Colorado. There were a lot of important impacts during this time period, such as political alliances divided into 2 broad camps, associated with the liberal and conservatives, people believing in strong central rule and an important role of the church. One of the major crises is the result of Mexicans becoming a minority within Texas, making a huge impact in both USA and Mexico. Benito Juárez was one of the most important men in Mexico's history. From being a person without benefits and rights, he became one of the most important persons in the country at that time. What did he do so important? Well, he overthrew the Second Mexican Empire, restored the Republic, and used liberal measures to modernize the country. The conservatives and liberals fighting for a real long time, almost since the country became independent, and it ended up until Porfirio Diaz became dictator. One of the reasons that they have been fighting is because Juarez and his people wanted to stop fueros, which are special treatment of privileged. During the fight, the Ley Lerdo was created in 1856. This law ordered the sale of all church land that wasn't used with a religious purpose. The church was mad, and it started to lose power and people. Eventually, Juarez and his allies defeated the conservatives, ending the War of Reform. A year later, Juarez was elected the country's president. Thanks to the French invasion, the Second Empire was created in Mexico. France wanted the money Mexico owed them from wars and what they had lended. Mexico was in the big debts, so Napoleon knew it would be easy to overtake Mexico and take territory and goods, so he sent Maximiliano de Habsburgo to rule Mexico. When Maximiliano de Habsburgo came to Mexico, he realized that Mexico was in the ruins, so he decided to help them, and little by little, he fell in love with the Mexican culture. Maximiliano was supposed to be a conservative, but he had a lot of liberal ideas, making both conservative and liberal people wanting him out of the power. The people wanted a good change. When Mexico overthrew France, a lot of positive impacts occurred, such as Mexico finally gaining its independence. People realized that they needed was a Mexican government and wanted to become as independent as they could, and they knew they could achieve great things. After 2 decades of war since 1846 till 1967, Mexico began to have a structured government and a more fair country. The population grew, and Mexico soon became an industrialized country that was able to import and export its products. Since the beginning of his ruling, Juarez immediately talked about making economic, political, and educational reforms. The school was mandatory. Railways were built to increase commerce and make transportation easier. The country's administration was now focused on rebuilding the economy and creating a better educational system. But not everything was perfect. A clear government was established. People wanted to be heard. Mexico, wanting a real change, led them into the Porfiriato that was from 1876 till 1910. Porfirio Diaz became the president of Mexico in 1877 and re-elected himself for more than 30 years. While Porfirio was in power, people were oppressed and did not have free expressions. There were many poor people and few rich. The government took the land away from people, and a lot of corruption. Even though Porfirio had bad things, he was one of the Mexican presidents that made the Mexican economy increase the most. He made a lot of great impacts since Mexico became industrialized and globalized. He brought the railroads, made Mexico's economy grow a lot, and growth of mineral search and selling. After this, Mexico became a country where real elections didn't exist anymore, and revolution started for the search of a better government. This will conclude our documentary of Mexico in the 1800s. Thank you for listening.